Hey guys, Tassel Dromedary here, and are you as excited as I am? I saved a bunch of money on my car insurance by switching to Desolator Insurance. Just kidding, Kaladesh spoilers. Just kidding again, I hate spoiler season. Just kidding, I don't completely hate it, I just slightly dislike it. I just find it slightly over the top. Wizards does this little trickle out card thing where they act like every card reveal is like they're showing that they found the frickin' holy grail. Now this may not surprise some of you, but I'm kind of into Magic the Gathering, owning a Magic the Gathering YouTube channel and all. It's a bit of an interest of mine, bit of a hobby. So when a new set comes out and we finally, it's been built up, we've seen a little bit of artwork and we know a little bit about it, and then they finally start showing the cards and the different mechanics. It's exciting. I get excited about it. So for me to say that it's a little too hyped up, it's kind of on the same level as an Apple product release, which they hype up whether it's exciting or not. It's just a little much. If they would just kind of release them and be like, cool, are you guys excited? Not like, whoa, trade show, giant cards, things being pulled off like curtains, and oh my gosh. They might as well just have a 90s level Steve Ballmer freak out, coming out on the stage like he's on cocaine, blasting off pyrotechnics and reveal that you laser projected the card onto the moon. Guys, it's a little much. That said, I'm still pretty excited about Kaladesh, and the cards look awesome, and most of all, the artwork looks freaking amazing. Especially like the characters, like the humans and all that. Oh my gosh, it's just so cool, just what they're wearing and the poses and the lighting and the scenery. I love it. They've been really nailing the artwork lately in the last couple sets. So now, completely outside of Magic the Gathering on YouTube, just in YouTube in general, there is such a problem with people just covering the same thing over and over and over, especially the big news channels. Oh, and don't even get me started on the gaming channels. At this point, who haven't you seen, play, well, I'll say Minecraft, but probably a better example is Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, aka Tabs. They must have basically just sent that game to really particular people. And the game is awesome and I really want a copy. My gaming channel has at least 100 subscribers, maybe more. Seriously, I've been way too busy, but Goat Simulator coming really soon. Anyway, so my point is, I'm not going to sit there and cover all the new cards and go through them and give my thoughts on it. I'm just going to give my thoughts on the set in general and kind of draw some logical conclusions, because that seems to be my niche, and you guys seem to like that. Except for 5% of you, where I swear if I reached my hand through the screen and handed you money, you'd still leave a rude comment. But those people are awful, miserable, pathetic excuses for human beings, so screw those people. For the rest of you, let's talk about some mechanics. My mechanic is pretty good. He gave me a great deal on some tires. Just kidding, let's talk about some card mechanics. Although there are a lot of vehicles in the set, sort of a Segway. Hey, a Segway is sort of a vehicle. That's like Segwayception. It's a Segway inside of a Segway about a Segway. That's 4th dimension level stuff. Can you tell this video's not scripted? I also had some kind of generic $1 energy drink this morning, and I've been swatting at bugs that aren't there all day, so I'm a little off it today. But you know what's totally on it today? Fabricate. Fabricate is followed by a numeric value, and then it states when this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So not just a clue sitting there, not just, a dummy let's drive up affinity in Metalcraft or whatever they're calling it this time around. It's an actual creature. It's 1/1, it's colorless, and honestly it's probably more useful than clues. Now everybody knows I love ETB effects, enters the battlefield, so the fact that they have an ETB mechanic, I am just ecstatic. With all the flicker effects, people are going to be screwing with this to no end. It is going to be awesome. I think between all the mechanics in the whole set, there's a lot of build-up. There's a lot of gradual build-up where, by turn 7, you're going to be pulling off some crazy spells. And I don't know if you guys noticed a theme, but I have to mention this because this really confirms it. I've suspected this for a long time, and then what we've seen from this set absolutely confirms it. Let's go back to M13 through M14, okay? You get a card like Stormtide Leviathan, or just something absolutely amazing, any of the Sphinxes printed ever and half the dragons. If it costs more than 5, it's worthless. I don't care if it literally says you win the game. You can't get there. You can't get there. Green as a color usually has ramps, so usually green can get there, but you're not going to see people playing 7 and 8 cost cards because they're just too hard to get out. Now the 7 starting cards automatically grant you a certain amount of land drop on turn 1, 2, and 3, and it's higher than like turn 15, for example, because land should be 1/3 of your deck. So you'll get +1 land in your hand every 3 turns without modifying it or drawing or scrying or. So basically, you can get to 3 because you're starting with 7, but getting to 6 is insanely hard. So why were they printing these gigantic sphinxes and dragons and leviathans and crabs and all these cards when nobody wanted them? They were unplayable. It didn't matter if they were mythic, rare, lifelink, death touch. Doesn't matter. You can't play them in a game. There's not enough ramp to get them out, and they're just worthless, pointless, stupid cards. You better like them for their artwork and their power and their flavor, because that's all they're good for. Now fast forward to Battle for Zendikar, and you can dump so much land onto the battlefield, then there's landfall to support it. I mean, look at my Crypto Bomb deck. You could bring out Eldrazi just like it was nothing, and they cost 10+. Even in Superland Junior, that deck was insane. You could get out the 8 cost, the 9 cost, the 10 cost, Void Winnower. That was like reasonable to expect that to happen. I was so happy when they finally made really ridiculously high cost, just anything, spells, cards, creatures, whatever, and then gave you a way to actually play them. I mean, it was like a 7 cost card was broken. It was just pointless. So fast forward, and we've got cards like Architect of the Untamed. And not even just the card, the mechanic on it. The whole concept of energy counters. It's kind of like Scions, but more effective because they're not susceptible to getting, blown up or forced to chump block. The best way that I can describe energy counters, and this is why I'm so excited, is it's basically like lands and mana that survive between turns, and obviously phases as well, because that's when your mana pool drains. When you build up tons and tons and tons of mana in your pool, you have to immediately spend it or you lose it. So if you do some big combo and tap all your Scions for mana with Cryptolith right and then sack them, you better spend that 10 mana right now, otherwise you lose it. It's a one-shot deal, and it looks like, these energy counters are as well. If you add energy counters to yourself, you could use them just whenever you want. So if you sit there and do some little trick or some combo to give yourself a boatload of energy counters, you get to keep those. So instead of just mana paying for stuff, you can pay for certain things with energy counters, and it's brilliant. It really, really, really resembles other games like Hearthstone, and I think Force of Will uses that, where you just kind of gradually go up, 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 and then there they are. I'd consider those more like, an auto land system, but the fact that these just apply directly to the player and they're just sort of like a power level, it really does kind of come close to resembling those. So Architect of the Untamed by itself says when a land enters the battlefield under your control, so basically landfall, but they didn't want to print it because, then they're recycling mechanics, so they just spelled it out to make it look like they're not recycling mechanics. Anyway, landfall, you get 1 energy counter, and then it has an ability of pay, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Geez, that's a lot. Pay 8 energy counters, so that's the cost, and then it's an activated ability. Create a 6/6 colorless beast artifact creature token. So it's a 2/3, and it's an elf, and it's an artificer for 3. I mean, that might come up. Maybe there's a tribal thing going on there. So it's like a reasonably okay creature. It could block some stuff. It's not bad. But then you've got it sitting out there just with the landfall effect and with the activated ability that's a big late game threat. And it's still a creature that you can actually use, not an enchantment or artifact. And I love cards like that. They're just utility creatures. One of the most popular and expensive cards in all of Modern is, of course, Dark Confidant, which most people don't even consider to be a creature, and they certainly don't use it like one. I've seen people so committed to its triggered ability that just in case the 1 in a million shot, I'm wide open because it has destroyed all my creatures, and they're still not going to swing for 2 just in case. Who knows? Kill shot, Celestial Flare, I don't know. I don't make that mistake though. I play Magic properly, so you can be swinging away with this 2/3 and then you got the late game threat. Now, a lot of the new players are like, yeah, but counters, what do they mean counters? Because they haven't really had alternate counters for quite a while. Although you may not have ever been told that Planeswalkers use loyalty counters. So you actually were using alternative counters. But there have been like charge counters and like, poison counters. I can't really think of many others. It's been a while. But counters can go on anything. I mean, you're probably thinking +1/+1 counters. Those are just counters, just plain counters. But these are energy counters, and when it says you get an energy counter, it's a counter on you. So pretend you're on the board and you're a card, you drop it on yourself. So whether it's going to be an actual die just sitting there, I mean, you can balance it on your head if you want. You could literally put the counter on yourself. I know I'm going to. That's just a given. Or if it's just going to be like kind of like Clues where you just line up a whole bunch of tokens and each one is an energy counter, which is going to so totally look like Pokemon. I think that's the way they're going to do it. But either way, that's what it is. You're placing a counter on yourself as the player. And that's basically what you were doing with poison counters anyway. So, nothing really that new. So if somebody destroys all your land or you get land screwed or something, you have like an alternate way of paying for abilities, but almost definitely not spells from what I've seen, where you can keep the battle going just with your energy counters. Or if you're all the way tapped out, your mana's tapped out and you're like, oh, great, I'm playing blue control and now they see that I'm tapped out because I had to counter the spell. You might have something coming out of your back pocket with the energy counters. And I just love that. It makes the game more complex, but in a good way. I cannot wait to play with it. Now, everybody on every forum and website and comment section and everything everywhere already called Wizards out on this because, people like to complain. And I do agree with this to a point. They're saying it's another mechanic that only works with itself. You're never going to see energy counters in Modern because too many of the cards would have to be from Standard, otherwise nothing works with it. There's no way to generate energy counters without putting 5 energy counter generating cards in your deck, for example. So none of these cards are going to Modern no matter how good they are. So what? I mean, who cares? Like, I like building new Modern Rogue decks, but look how it turned out last time with the Eldrazi. That went really well. I am so sick of seeing the same stupid decks win in Modern over and over and over. You guys know that I am a big proponent of just completely banning Affinity and banning Storm. Some of the more obnoxious interactive crap decks, but, decks that actually really play Magic the normal way and aren't just stupid gimmicks and infinite combos like, Zoo and Jund. I'm still sick of seeing those. I mean, just because I agree with them because they're like real decks and not, stupid gimmicks, doesn't mean I'm not sick of seeing them. I am sick of seeing them. So if somebody comes up with a new deck because of a new set that came out in Standard and it becomes, tier 1.5 maybe even tier 1, that's cool because, it shakes it up, pisses off all the old-time pros who've been sitting on the same deck for 5 years and think they could just keep riding that forever. Little shakeups are nice, and a lot of statements by Wizards completely agree with me on that. That said, I also completely agree with their statement that everybody and their grandma at Wizards made, which is, we design for Standard, Standard is our product. We do not design cards for Modern. It's Standard first, everything else second. So Modern takes a backseat to Standard. So if they want to add some wacky new thing, screw Modern. Okay, Modern's going to take one for the team and keep being stale and boring for another half year. It's not that big of a deal, guys. And I say if you're going to make an interesting Standard set, that is worth just ignoring Modern for a little bit. Oh, and keep in mind, if there's a good enough Fabricate card and you could make use of just some little chump blockers and stuff, who knows? It could creep into a Modern deck. I think it's about time for a non-infinite loop Modern token deck, because why isn't there one? There are good token decks, but there's none that are, really all that competitive. So hopefully Fabricate helps that out, because that would be awesome. Next up, I know a lot of YouTubers are burying the lead by not covering this one, but it is amazing. It is probably my favorite card so far. Tassel Dromedary. It's a creature, it's a camel, it's white, and it's a 0/4 for 1. I love 0 large numbers for 1. That is like a white staple. It's also kind of a blue thing, but I just love it. You just put it out and it just gets in the way, like an actual camel. So they made it a camel. Now, for horribly underrated, dirt cheap, giant block cows, as I call them. Oh, either that or usually if it's an artifact, I call it a lawn ornament. You just throw it out there, it just gets in the way. It's a block cow. I mean, it's like India, and you the cow blocks the road, and you just can't get around it because it's just too big and too defensive. A block cow. So now they made it a camel. Now remember the last kind of obnoxious, highly defensive white creature that was kind of like this? The Nyx Fleece Ram. That's right, they made it a ram, which is pretty much just a sheep. I almost said goat. Guys, I'm from Wisconsin. God, I know what a freaking goat and a cow and a sheep are. So hooray for the camel, and just the artwork and the look on his face where he's like, I know I'm fabulous. I freaking love it. Next up, let's look at the Sky Sovereign console flagship, because it's a great example of a vehicle. Now, a lot of the new mechanics in the last couple sets, you say, well, it's good, but it's not that good. It's kind of like Bestow and Constellation. I mean, Bestow was pretty good, but Constellation, people are like, well, it's good, but it's not that good. It's not good enough to be like, I'm building a Constellation deck. With this one, I mean, you've got the biggest downside in the history of downsides. I mean, it's like more detrimental than Convoke because you have to do it once it's already out. You're losing attackers, you're losing blockers, because the crew ability says, tap any number of creatures you control with total power 3 or more, the vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. Now that's a little bit confusing. So what it really means is this is a vehicle, so it has a power of 6 and a toughness of 5, but it can't actually attack because it's not a creature, it's a vehicle. What's really weird about this is it's basically a new... what do they call it? Like a type, like a super type or whatever, but they made it a subtype because it's after the hyphen. It's a legendary artifact, not a vehicle, and yet it has a power and toughness, but it's not a creature, so it's actually like a new type. I guess they just didn't want it to be a new type. Anyway, the number after the crew indicates the power, so you got to find something with power 3 or more, and then they're powerful enough to steer and operate the vehicle, I guess. So as long as you got your guy there that you can tap, then it becomes a creature until end of turn, and you can ram it down the enemy's throat. So you're losing an attacker and blocker, and that's pretty bad, and it's power 3 or more, so that's really bad. And then if they remove them, you've got a parked vehicle that might as well be impounded because it's sitting there doing nothing. As far as I can tell, it can't even block because it's not a creature. But it's a 6/5 flyer for 5, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls? This thing must have laser cannons on it or something. Like, as far as just if this was a creature card, it's pretty good. The attack and toughness compared to the 5, and then the fact that it's colorless, or generic I should say, it's not colorless. Thank God they didn't revive that yet, as far as I've seen. And then you add the automatic 3 damage. I mean, there have been slightly shrunken, smaller versions of this in past sets that were insanely popular. Anything that has every time I swing I deal damage, that's huge. It doesn't matter what it costs. And this is very reasonable to get out. It's just the downside is crew. So it is a detriment, but it's a detriment that allows them to print stuff that's just nuts like this card. Now, I should mention that, you know, you got a 3 power guy sitting out there. Everybody knows what he's used for. He's the pilot. He's going to make the airship hit you. So then they try and hit him with a removal spell. Well, they added secondary backup kind of ambushy stuff. I mean, it is a sorcery, but so far we've got start your engines. Vehicles you control become artifact creatures until end of turn. So basically, they're on autopilot. And then also creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Since it's sequential in chronological order there, vehicles get +2/+0 until end of turn because at that point they're creatures. Hooray for 2-stage resolution, woo! So they blow up your pilot, you start your engines. I have a feeling there's probably going to be a card that will just let vehicles just attack on their own. It's probably going to be called like autopilot or something hilarious like that, or like ghost pilot, or who knows. Now, there is one little catch. Now, if you look at the Sky Skiff, which is a 2/3 flyer for 2, so, I mean, there's that insane power, but the downside is crew, but it's crew 1. So you only have to tap a number of creatures you control with power 1 or more. I honestly have no idea why you would tap more than 1, but since they worded it that way, I assume there's a reason. But you have to do it to attack, and then you also have to do it to block. So if you want to tap a creature to block, you could then on your turn untap it, then use it to attack, and then it would have attacked, so it's tapped so you can't block. But if you give it vigilance, you're basically going to need 2 crew members. So, I mean, it's a little bit bigger of a downside, but I still like it. I think it's cool. Oh, and by the way, I found the $25 card, guys. Aetherworks Marvel. You know, I was saying, you know, energy counters, and you kind of got to build your deck around it because nothing else ever printed in all of Magic interacts with it except for its own set. I would drop this by itself into my black deck. I kill so much crap that if I got a Phyrexian Obliterator out for free after killing 6 things, you know, more power to me. So some of these are standalone good, and that's what I'm thinking might happen with Fabricate too. Here's the golden rule for you. If a card has the phrase, without paying its mana cost, anywhere on the card pretty much, it's going to be powerful and it's going to be worth money. I'm sure there are exceptions, but in general that's true. So that's about it for now for what we know about how the set works. In general, I love it. I like the design of it. I like the artwork. I like the cards. I like the strategy. I like the decks. I pretty much like everything. And there's one more thing I gotta mention real quick. Gremlins. If you're building a bunch of inventions and robots and vehicles and crap, dude, Gremlins, man, if you don't know the history, neither do I. I'm going to butcher the living crap out of this, but World War, we'll say 2, it's probably 1. Whenever pilots would have like a plane breakdown or like an engine fail or something goes wrong in mid-flight, they'd blame it on gremlins. Not very seriously. They just said, oh, it must be a gremlin in the engine because, I fixed this up myself and it was supposed to work perfectly. So it must have been a mythical creature that I just created as a joke that ripped apart the engine. I'm sure there were some people who took it way too seriously, but that's just like, it's taking like old American lore, or maybe British. Like I said, I'm going to butcher this. I hate history. Not one of my better subjects, but, to take that and throw it into the game, that's just kind of funny. So hopefully there's even more mechanics that we haven't seen yet. They do usually not display every single mechanic on like day 1, but there's a lot in it so far, so who knows. I'm excited to see what comes out. And this time around, guys, I'm going to try to build an entire deck just on the spoilers. And that is really hard to do because I build decks pretty much exclusively using the Gatherer website. And that doesn't work so good with like the standard filter in it. Like prior to when the cards are in standard. There is one little downside that I see so far, and it's a little early for this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. The set looks awesome and super fun, especially for deck builders. It looks really flexible. It's not just going to be the vampires deck, the werewolves deck. It's like you can put some stuff together, get creative, and build some crazy stuff that nobody's seen before. And then get obliterated by the current decks in standard right now. Nothing I see so far in Kaladesh stands a chance in hell against the top standard decks right now. Not in a million billion years. And nothing kills a set faster than that. If you're like, oh, cool, I'm going to build a vehicle deck. Oh, I'm going to build an all-artificer deck. Woo, I'm going to go gremlins. Woohoo, I'm going to do energy counters. And then you show up to F&M and just get stomped by blue-white spirits. That's like taking Kaladesh and just kicking it right in the nuts. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but I'm also worried about power creep. So if this set turns out to be a little bit less powerful than Eldritch Moon and SOI, which is what I estimated would happen, whatever, such is life. Eventually SOI and EMN are going to cycle out. So anyways, what do you guys think of the new mechanics and the artwork and the cards and the everything, the whole thing? Leave your comments below and I will see you guys next video.